One of the new tools in the latest release of LP360 in version 2023.3 is the ability to export a surface as a LandXML file. So LandXML is a very common format that's used to transfer surface data into a downstream CAD workflow, Civil 3D, or similar packages. We have added the ability to create a land XML from directly within LP360, and then you can then push that downstream to your other software tools. So I'm just going to demonstrate this very quickly. It's a relatively straightforward tool. I'm going to use a data set. This is from our test site in Huntsville. You may recognize that if you sat in any of our training or any of our webinars. So this is an older data set. It's actually TrueView 640 data, so a Minivux, Regal Minivux based system. Obviously, the data has been processed. The point cloud's been classified. I've got a ground surface here, as well as some above ground features. For this particular data set, there's just under 5 million points in the ground surface. So now I'm at the point where I want to go through and export that as a land XML. The actual tool itself is very straightforward. I'll show you that, but then there's a couple of things that we want to talk through. So if I want to export a surface as a land XML file, very straightforward. I specify the points I want to use. So you use the normal source points filter. Typically, this would be set to your ground class because you're likely to do it's a ground surface that you're exporting. But you can filter on any of the numerous attributes that we expose in the filter. And then there's a user setting to set a maximum number of points in the LandXML file. LandXML is a very popular format, but it's quite an old format, and it's also fairly it's a heavy format. The file sizes get very big very quickly as the number of points scaled up. It's a format that wasn't designed when we were dealing with, 1 million, 10 million, 50 million points in a surface. So in talking to users, we felt it was best to give you some capability to limit that based on your downstream tools, depending on what specifically you're trying to do or the kind of product you're trying to generate. No clear consensus, but I heard numbers about 300, 500,000 points, maybe 1 million points, something like that. But you have complete control over that. Just keep in mind the land XML format will blow up very quickly given the point densities you have in LiDAR data if you don't do some thinning of the points. And I'll talk about that next. And then we just give it a location to go save that land XML file. But let's talk about that thinning. So here I've got my data set. I've got about 5 million points in my ground class. We have a couple of ways to thin a class of points in LP360. A very common approach is to use one of our statistical thinning point cloud tasks. So this is where you can set a specific density and thin the points to that density. So a common approach here is to use 2 or 8 points per square meter in the US because those correspond to quality level for 3-depth data for government standards on LiDAR data, 2 points or 8 points per square meter being QL2 or QL1 respectively, but you can choose any density that you want. If you're working with drone data, of course, typically your native density is going to be much higher than that, 50, 100, 150, 200 plus points per square meter. Now you don't have to use LiDAR data, drone data for LandXML. You can use this LandXML export for any point cloud class from any source. But we do want to go ahead and thin it. I'm not going to use the statistical thinning though. I'm going to take the opportunity just to generate a regular gridded surface model of my ground class. I'm going to do this by creating a DTM, a raster DTM, and then converting that into a point class. And then I will take that point class, which will be thinned to the grid spacing, the postings that I want, and create my land XML file from that. So it's relatively straightforward to do. I can use my export wizard. If you've worked with LP360 for any amount of time, you've probably used this tool a fair bit. I'm going to export a surface here. I'm going to filter my points. So this is where I'm going to do my class filtering in this particular workflow. And here we're just going to filter to my ground points, which, as I mentioned, just under 5 million points. My posting or my cell size, this project is in meters, so we'll go with 1.5 meters, about 5-foot postings. We want to do a DTM, so we're doing elevation, and we're going to do this as a GeoTIFF. I'll do the full extent of the layer. It's not a particularly large project site, and we'll just give it a file to save. Call this DTM 1-5 meter, and insert it back into my map. So I've got my raster DTM, but now I want to convert that to a regular point grid, and I can do that simply using if I go into my add files, I can bring any raster dem in and convert that to a point file in LAS format, of course. So I'm just going to go grab that raster. Set my PDRF here. Now the raster, of course, doesn't carry the class information, so I just need to reset that. This is all ground points, of course, that's what I exported, and we'll go ahead and bring that in. Okay, so let's brought that in as the last layer in my map. Turn off my original last layer. Switch to my dem last layer here. And just for convenience, I'll turn off the Google. So we can see we've got a regularized grid here on that 5 meter posting. And if I look at the size of that, we'll see, of course, it's much reduced, just under 50,000 points. So now I can create my LandXML file. And as I mentioned, it's very straightforward. So I've got the new export tool up here, not a lot of settings I need to worry about. I don't need to filter because that's essentially what I did by creating the DTM for my ground points. I've already filtered to my ground surface. I already talked a little bit about the max setting here. You may want to tweak this depending on your downstream tools and the max size of a LandXML file that you can work with. Just give it an output file. And we'll call this DTM 1.5 meter export. And go ahead and kick that off. It exports very quickly. It's a very lightweight file. It's not exactly a one-to-one export on the point count just because of the way that the conversion is done and the way that LandXML file is written. But we do give you, the sense of how many points are in that surface, how many facets are in that surface. And so you can make a sanity check, a consistency check with the surface that you exported. Now, I can, of course, check that I do have that LandXML file in here. LP360 itself doesn't natively read LandXML, so I'm actually just going to go open this in the LandXML viewer from Carlson. So there we go. So now you've got a lightweight version of your surface, but you can use that in any downstream software that can natively ingest a LandXML file and move that into your downstream workflows. So again, this feature is available once you upgrade to version 2023.3 in LP360. It's on the new project ribbon. If you haven't seen the new GUI, that's a whole other set of improvements we've added in this latest release. We've modernized the GUI. We've got ribbons here. You can create custom ribbons. Really very effective way to streamline and add some efficiency to your workflow. The export LandXML is found on the project ribbon, but of course you can put that on any custom ribbon that you want. So that's the new export LandXML function in LP360 version 2023.3. Thank you.